Shila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Preman Haribo. Good morning to all of you. Welcome. We are continuing with our series on Vaishnava etiquette, rules and love in the life of a sadhaka. So thank you very much for your presence today. And today is meeting number 17. We will continue speaking about pracara, what sometimes may be translated as preaching, but as we have been seeing, it means much more than what we may understand in connection to that term. So today we will finish this section in particular regarding pracara, but as usual we will make some brief summary of what we were discussing in our previous meeting on Thursday, first meeting about pracara, where as usual we were sharing some conceptual orientation to the very idea of pracara, as pra-achar, as we mentioned. Achar means behavior, conduct, and pra means a special type of. So pra-achar, that we translate sometimes as preaching, actually means a very special type of behavior that preaches by itself, if you will. When you behave very nicely, that will be the most powerful discourse, the most deep message that will really reach home, if you will, in other hearts. So it's not only the idea of preaching as we may have it in the context of just proselytizing, evangelizing, conversion, and preaching and dissemination to others, new people coming to our ranks, if you will, but has to do mainly, it all begins with a transformation in our hearts, and that transformation will expand into other hearts. And some information may be in the context of that transformation. But of course, in this way, prachar, the very word prachar includes the word achar, so the very concept of preaching includes the idea of practice. So practice and preaching are quite intertwined, should nourish each other. I should practice in a way that my own insights will overflow. The gift that I receive is overflowing me, and that will sprinkle others. That will be my preaching. And I will be engaged in that preaching with such a background in such a way that I will in turn nourish my practice. That is the ideal standard. One will be nourishing the other. Both will act as, if you will, cause and effect mutually. Of course, we also spoke about whenever we are facing some other person sharing the message, sharing our testimony, sharing Siddhanta, it should be done with utmost humility, not in the context that I will teach you about what to do, if you will. I'm senior than you, so here, listen to me. But I will try to extend the grace that knocked on my door, and totally underserving, and I will try to extend that to your heart. So eventually you may embrace it, and you will be transformed to a point that you will give me your sangha. You will bless me with your association. So in this idea, we are looking for sangha even when we are preaching. So preaching should be done, prachar should be engaged in with humility, with compassion, as we mentioned, not so much trying to convert the whole world to Gaudiya Vedanta. So everyone is doing the same thing you are doing, and in that way they will be confirming your own faith, because you need everyone else to be doing that in order for you to be sure what you are doing. That's not the idea. But universal compassion, melting hearts on some degree or another should be there. And again, preaching, as we mentioned, preaching prachar is another way of saying actually harikatha, is another way actually of saying kirtan, to speak about Hari, to share words about our Istadev, about the object of our affection, Hari, Guru, Vaishnava. So, and Shravan, of course, you are speaking, some other is hearing, you yourself are hearing what you are saying, so you are increasing your commitment with the message in order to walk the talk. So, in other words, prachar is one of the main angas of bhakti, Shravan, Kirtan, and of course, again, very crucial the role of the audience there. It's not only I'm here speaking and you listen to me, but actually if the person is really listening, that person will be contributing with at least 50% of the whole equation, if you will, or more even. If they are sincere, if they present relevant questions, that will kindle somehow or other the whole discourse to new heights and levels. So this prachar is seva. This prachar is our attempt to please the object of our affection. Prachar should not be done in the context of fostering pratishta, as a quest for position, fame, followers, and so on. And for that, of course, it's important that if we are about to preach, if we are about to share the message, we should be honest and sincere and introspective with ourselves and realize how much capacity do I have to speak about what I'm practicing, what I'm speaking, which capacity do I have to speak about certain topics in particular that may be way above my head. How am I to deal with this byproducts of prachar in the form of admiration, praise, and so on. So everything should be done according to personal capacity. So that requires constant inner examination. So a real preacher will be a real introspective, contemplative personality, if you will. And of course, we have to know the Siddhanta in order to speak about that. We have to know the role and reach of what we may call teaching techniques, outreach techniques, preaching strategies, sometimes call us that, which do not necessarily mean that, for example, one of the examples we gave is the broader the message, as diluted as I can make my presentation, the more compassionate I'm being because I can reach more and more people. Not necessarily that's the case. Compassion will take different forms, and one form is also to present the Siddhanta cities and to nourish the path of people who is really committed for life in this marga, in this path. And of course, if you become on the other side more and more esoteric, that may not be also the most compassionate thing in a given case. So it all depends on desha, kala, patra, time, place, circumstance. Considering the audience, considering the level of the adhikar, the eligibility of the audience. So adjusting what we are presenting, certain details, delivering the principles, and sharing education. Prachar basically is education. We have to be educated and educate others properly. And we should be educated in our education, in the context of educating others. We ourselves should be ladies and gentlemen, if you will. There's no necessity of demonizing the anti-party, if you will, demonizing the Purva Pakshin, the opposing party. But in case we need to expose certain philosophies which do not align with ours, I mean, we should be able to do so in a respectful way, appreciative way, not necessarily to send everyone else to hell or something like that. And again, preaching also means deep commitment with the message and our own practice, but also with the ones who accept to hear from us, who are sharing, gifting us with their valuable time and energy, like all of you are doing now with me. I take that as a real gift from you to me. You are engaging me in this seva, so that's a commitment for me. Whatever I'm saying, hopefully you may give me the blessings to be able to practice that and to be willing to assist you. And of course, not because I'm senior to anyone, but to be assisted by you as well in our respective paths regarding what we are speaking here. So a brief summary of what we were sharing last week. And today we will continue with, if you will, more practical tips regarding Vaishnava etiquette in the context of Prachar. Our main meeting, our first meeting in this connection was, as you can see, more Sambandha-like, if you will. So now let's jump into the Abhideya field, into the practical application of some of these concepts and how they play out in our modern times even. We will share some modern contemporary sensibilities concerning Prachara and so on. So again, to begin with, something I would like to emphasize to begin with in connection to what we spoke in our previous meeting and we will be continuing today, I think it's very important, never enough important, to re-emphasize that sharing Harikatha, the sharing of Harikatha represents a very sacred moment. It's not an ordinary meeting. It's not just, well, it may externally seem so, and we may externally transform that into that in our eyes. I just click consume and I'm there in the talk, and that's all. And we lose the mystic side of it, if you will. So we should be really careful about not losing sight of the extraordinary nature of the possibility of invoking Harikatha and be part of that. It's a very sacred moment where Hari himself is invoked in the form of Harikatha. He himself said many times, Naham Tishtami Vaikunte, and so on, many verses there. We say, when one or two of my devotees get together speaking about me, chanting about me, I'm there. So this is a very powerful moment. So Harikatha Prachar, in other words, represents a very sacred moment where both speaker and audience will try to be actually instrumental. We are not the main characters, nor you nor me. We are but instruments trying to allow the will of Bhagavan to affect us in the context of bhakti, of course, a particular type of impact and influence. And that's why every Harikatha, and also in the cases of writing a book, generally that was the Gaudiya standard, generally starts with something called Mangaletoram. So I would like to share some words about this in the context of Prachar, because I consider it very important. Mangaletoram, which we may define as here as I will define it at least as the most important part of Harikatha, the most crucial moment, even though it may last for some few minutes, that will determine the course, the remaining course of the whole session, if you will. It will determine how much we will be actually witnesses and not the main characters, again, in this story. So Mangala Acharan, let's define the term. We are speaking about pra-achar. Remember, the word achar is there. So here again, Mangala Achar, Acharanam. So Acharana means action, to do something, and Mangala has to do with auspiciousness. So Mangala Acharan, if we divide the word in two, even though it's presented as one, has to do with invoking auspiciousness, blessings, Mangala, before doing Acharan, something important generally. So Mangalacharan will be there again. The basic idea here is that in this particular context that we are sharing now, speaking Harikatha, Prachar, the idea in connection to the Mangalacharan is we are not independent. The speaker is not independent. The audience is not independent of Bhakti's grace. Therefore, we need the blessings of Hari, Guru, Vaishnavas to be proper, again, puppets, if you will, proper channels. Since the success of the kata is that the success will be they are given the Harikatha. They are the ones who are inspiring something special into our hearts. So the idea of Mangaletoram has to do with that, invoking blessings, as we will see in a few minutes, in a particular way, in a particular order, to certain particular personalities. But let me share some words, very nice words written by Satyanarayan Das Babaji in his commentary on the Mangaletoram of Tattva Sandarbha, which I really like a lot. So in the context of what's a Mangaletoram, so I will read them for you, if you allow me. In this context, of course, this Mangaletoram of the Tattva Sandarbha is a Mangaletoram that is written by Srila Jiva Goswami before himself starting his book. So again, a Mangaletoram can be there before writing a book or before giving Harikatha, before starting some special action that requires special mercy. Strictly speaking, at one point, everything will be special and require special mercy, but here are very crucial moments when we really want to be channels. So these are two brief paragraphs. It says like this. Try to follow the English, please. Without immediate apperception of the truth, metaphysical speculation, however thorough and penetrating, must remain within the sphere of intellectual thought construction. That's called kalpana, like imagination. It is in recognition of this fact that enlightened sages and authors of the past realized the need to first attune their awareness to the conscious source before initiating the writing process, or in this case, Harikata. In this way, the truth that was intended to be disclosed will shine through their psyche of its own accord, with no personal sense of doership or egoic self-appropriation on the part of the author. The composition of a Mangaletoram, or auspicious invocations, at the beginning of philosophical works, is a method by which the author's consciousness is linked with his or her worshipful deity and the line of masters. In the deeper sense, it is thus self-surrender, or dying to the separate self-sense, which allows for the self-revelation and pervasion of the light of the Absolute. In this way, Mangalacharan is to be understood not as mere eulogy, but as a conscious process by which illumination or higher cognitive mode of knowing becomes available to the writer. Mangalacharan is thus a key to transpersonal authorship. So it's a real nice way of describing what Mangalacharan is about, basically. In other words, understanding without the intervention of the Swarup Shakti, whatever I may think about and speak on that basis will remain in the realm of mental speculation or imagination, kalpana. And that's why great sages, grand personalities have, before starting writing a book, before invoking Harikata, which is a form of writing, if you will, has to do with they invoked this crucial auspiciousness invocation, trying to do away with the sense of personal doership, a separate sense of authorship, basically trying to be channel, surrender our ego, and understand here I am about to become a mere quote unquote instrument, so that my deity may inspire my heart in the process of trying to glorify him, her. So as I like the last, especially the last conception of Mangalacharana is thus a key to transpersonal authorship. That means it seems that I'm giving the Hakata, it seems that I'm writing the book, but actually someone else is writing, and actually I am the one who ends up being witnessing that. This was my experience with the book I'm writing now. We are in the process of editing now it. And I wrote that in one part of the, I think in the acknowledgement section, that generally you write a book for others to read it. But in this case, I felt someone else wrote the book and I was reading it. So similarly, this is the idea in Harikata. It seems you are speaking and some other is hearing, but at one point you will realize someone else is speaking here and I'm hearing. To me, it happens a lot during Harikata. I say sometimes certain things, and I realized, wow, that was interesting. That concept, that was really good. But immediately I realized it was not mine. It was not me. I'm not the owner of that. I cannot reclaim rights for my authorship. So it's transpersonal authorship. It's not me. So that's a very important point this way. This Mangaletoram has a lot to do with Pracara. Again, it's a crucial moment when both speaker, again, an audience, it's not that only the speaker may be leading the Mangalacharya and invoking certain particular mantras, but ideally the audience should follow. If they do not know the particular pranam mantras that they are being invoked, at least they should try to enter into that state of attuning, aligning themselves with what's happening at that particular moment, with that particular prayer and self-surrendering, in order to be really pervaded by a higher cognitive mode of knowing. So in Mangaletoram, both speaker and audience will join together. It's a teamwork, if you will. They will join together in prayer to be instruments of Bhakti's will. Praying not to have, again, an independent sense of existence during the kata. It's a very delicate moment. It's not just I sit, I hear, I sit, I speak, and maybe I become distracted with this and that. I mean, all those things will spoil the real experience of what's Harikatha. So ideally, both speaker and hearer should sit in order to, I don't want to have an independent sense of speaker, sorry, nor an independent sense of being a hearer, but actually I want to be fully instrumental here. So hopefully this doesn't only happens during the kata, but during our whole day and lives. But we have to begin somewhere as usual. So if we are not able to really condense and concentrate our focus in those specific sacred moments in our day, like Pracara in this case, it's possible that all along the rest of the day, we won't be able to sustain that experience as well. So it's important, again, to pay close attention to these crucial minutes. So regarding the Mangaletoram in itself, of course, there's no fixed rule. There's no one single way of invoking Mangaletoram before Prachar. There are different pranam mantras that may be invoked. If you have heard different sadhus, you will see that practically none of them follow one single same structure. Or at least they follow certain structure, but not the same content is there, if you will. A general structure that I personally am trying to follow, as my Guru Maharaj tries to follow, and as generally the Vaishnavas try to follow, there is some initial glorification to Sri Guru. And there are so many pranam mantras to him. So you may have realized which are the ones, in my case, I'm reciting. Om Agyanati Mirandasya, Nam Shristam from Raghunath Das. Then we can glorify the Vaishnavas. Then there may be a glorification of Sriman Mahaprabhu. From Guru Vaishnava we go to Gaur Lila, some glorifications to Gaur Nitai, Gaur Gadadhar, maybe there also. Some of the things will also depend on each one's affinity eventually. And from there we go to Krishna Lila. We will glorify Sri Krishna, Sri Radha, or Sri Radha Krishna together. There are different pranam mantras for them. And of course, there are many other mantras, personality we can glorify in the context of that. If you're speaking Bhagavatam, there are certain pranam mantras in glorification of the Bhagavatam, of Sukadev Goswami. Generally, sometimes also there is some closing with the glorification to Tulasi Devi or Brinda Devi, different pranam mantras for them. So again, this is a very encapsulated notion of that. If one would like to learn some particular way of conducting that, that's the general structure, and there are different mantras that in time one will learn, and one may feel some affinity with the blessings of the Vaishnava. One may include them into one's pranam mantra. It's not just any mantra, but certain mantras that are in the context of offering ourselves to those personalities. So it can be brief. A Mangaletoram can last for a few minutes or less than that, or it can be long. I remember always Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. There's one nice lecture he gave. I mean, many of those, but one I remember, I think, was on his Vyasa Puja, his 100th Vyasa Puja. He lived for 102 years. So he was giving Harikatha to the very last moment. So he was 100 years old and he was giving Harikatha. The lecture is available online. That's a very nice one, along with the whole celebration around him that day. And he began the lecture asking forgiveness to the audience, saying, I'm so old, my memory is failing, I cannot remember all the different verses that I used to know and quote in the proper places and so on, with the classical topmost humility he used to exhibit. He was a personification of. So he was begging forgiveness for his bad memory, quote unquote, and he then started Mangaletoram almost like for half an hour, invoking one pranam mantra after the other. And so I was thinking, well, if that is bad memory, what will be his good memory? No? So, but that was his standard, and of course he was really into that. If you really see him invoking those mantras, you really feel inspired, understand what's Mangaletoram about. So gradually we should enter into that mood. And again, this is the beginning point of Prachara, if you will. If you are about to give a lecture, to give Harikatha, ideally that should begin with Mangaletoram. So I want to share some words about this before going to more practical tips, if you will. So what else? Mangaletoram ki jai. Of course, and in that context also, let me say, the speaker of Harikatha will be considered again as a representative of Bhagavan, in that sense that the person is trying to surrender his, her ego and just be a channel, and will be specially venerated because he or she will represent, ideally, that's idea, an agent, the agency of the divine. And that's why he will be offered seat, special seat, vyasas and garlands and so on. So now we'll share some practical tips regarding these items, if you will. For example, the asana. Generally, I've seen sometimes the devotee will give harikata and some devotee will offer a special seat and the devotee giving harikata will deny, no, I don't want that special seat for me. So it sounded like it's level of humility, but actually the real humility is higher humility is not for you. No, the seat is not for you. The seat is for harikata. The seat is for Sri Guru, for parampara, who are the ones who are supposed to give the kata. You are supposed just to channel them, to be an instrument. So externally it may seem I'm very humble. No, I don't want that high seat. I'm too fallen. So still you are thinking you are going to give the lecture. Still you are thinking in terms of being a protagonist. So still there is some ego there. So there is not enough Mangaletoram. So the idea is the Vyasa asana, again, Vyasa asana. Vyasa means Vyasa, So the seat, the one who is speaking is trying to be a representative of Vyasa, who is kind of embodies the principle of Guru and Parampara. So we are there as agents. So the seat is not for us. So you may sit, you may touch the seat, put it on your head, like implying, I'm nobody to enter here, but I'm entering the spirit of service in the same way that you may enter the altar and step on the altar to fix the altar, to decorate, to do something in the context of service. It's not that you think yourself the deity. You follow. So humility may take different forms. One of them is you are in the altar, on the altar. It's not that you think yourself, you are indulging in ahangraha upasana, think yourself Krishna, Radha, or whoever. You are there because someone asked you to do seva. So you will be sitting in a very high seat, but it's not you who are sitting there. You are just doing that in the concept of service, and then you go down from there. You go only there to serve. So also, again, as I mentioned, the speaker will receive, for example, a garland, which is a way of expressing, again, gratitude to that person who will represent the parampara. We shouldn't take out the garland is for me. The garland is for Harikatha, for Bhagavatam, for Guru Parampara. And if we are offering the garland, also some, again, practical considerations that sometimes are useful, relative, but important. Try to take, sometimes I've seen devotees doing garlands from the day before, and in order for the flowers not to be like destroyed, if you will, in time for the next day of the lecture, they put the garlands on the fridge. So at the next day, the lecture is about to start, and they take the garlands out of the fridge and put the garland to the speaker. That will be a little cold, no? Especially if you live in the cold season. So there are relative considerations. Sometimes I've seen flowers full of ants, and the garland, therefore, is a whole ant parade that you have on your neck. So that's not the most becoming thing that may create some disturbance while speaking Harikatha. So we should be careful of those things. Sometimes, I don't know if you have this in the US, but in South America, sometimes they sell, that's not the ideal, but sometimes the devotees do not have their own flowers. They buy them for making the garlands, and some of those flowers are painted, like dyed. They dye the flowers. So when you put the garland with dyed flowers, sometimes the color of the flower starts to disappear and enter into your clothes. So at the end of the lecture, you have a chadar, a blue chadar, green chadar, multicolored chadar, or whatever. So details that we should pay attention to regarding garland tattva, if you will. Some other sadhus, like for example, my Guru Maharaj, he generally prefers not to wear garlands. I will say maybe in part for some of these reasons in the past, but also like it's not, again, the point is, if I know that the sadhu will feel more comfortable without those garlands, we should also respect that. We should not also impose our taste and understand, okay, there's a reason for that. I respect that, no problem. Or sometimes sadhu will receive the garland and they will immediately take that out, put them on their head, and leave it on one side, like accepting, okay, but do not remaining with that. Again, there's not better or worse way. There are reasons for each of them to happen. So we should understand them and do not feel, oh, I made this garland and he just wear that for 10 seconds and take that out. It had its purpose. So what else regarding Harikatha? Something important I will say in this connection is punctuality also. Punctuality. And many of these things, as we will see nowadays, especially in COVID era, apply to online meetings, not only to meetings that we are present live, but online meetings, especially this one, for example, punctuality. Nowadays, especially because we have people online connecting from so many places in the world, that some places may be later or too early, or they may have some other engagement. So punctuality has to do with respecting, like honoring the time of every person, their time and energy. For example, Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, he explains punctuality as an aspect of ahimsa, basically, non-violence. In other words, to not be punctual is a form of violence. You are not, basically, when you are not punctual, when you are not on time for a meeting, you basically are saying to the other person, my time is more important than your time. Once one devotee say that, I like that definition of impunctuality. My time is is more important than your time, which is exact opposite of humility. I mean, if I'm humble, I will never think I'm more important than you. And I am more important has so many ramifications. My time, my this, my that. So regarding punctuality, it's important to do the best of our efforts. Sometimes I've heard even this, well, which time is the lecture at 6, but 6 p.m. or 6 devotee time. So I'm sorry really to hear that our lack of punctuality came to such a point that there's another standard time. Like you have the EST, EDT, you have the Vaishnava time. So sometimes devotees will know, okay, the meeting is at 6, and everyone knows, the meeting will start 6:30. It's Vaishnava time. Even though that they announce that at 6, so everyone comes at 6:30. But the point is, as much as you are yourself, if you are organizing the meeting, you are not punctual, you are inviting the rest to do the same. So it's important that you start your meetings on time. So the ones who are late, they know for the next time, okay, this is starting on time. So they will regulate themselves. But especially again, as a way of showing proper regard for the time of the other person, respect for the energy and for the presence of the other person. I don't want to have someone waiting for me there for 25 minutes. So again, it's an important aspect of ahimsa, non-violence. What else? Well, this may be needless to say, but just in case, ideally we should not use cell phone during Harikatha, during Pracara, whether via Zoom, like we are doing now. Maybe I cannot see you through the cameras, or via live, or if you are present with your body present in one lecture, ideally you shouldn't have your cell phone there. You should turn that off for a minute. We are in the digital dynamics that sometimes we may think, what, but maybe something may be happening. I need to have my phone just in case. But that's too much, according to me. You should rest for a while, live for some hours a day from that. And if you want to take notes, better take a notebook, because sometimes I've heard that, no, Maharaj, I'm taking just notes in my cell phone. And that may be real, but sometimes that's a trick of your mind. Yeah, I will take some notes, but meanwhile, this new message here, this new message there. So that may be dangerous. So better you have a separate notebook, take notes there if you want to take notes. Sometimes taking notes may be quite distracting also, because you may be more concentrated about writing something that listening to what's going on. Maybe you can hear the lecture later and take notes again. That's another nice option to rehear the Harikatha. Also, sometimes during Harikatha, some devotees are taking pictures, which is not a problem, but it can become a distraction if you are taking too many pictures and in a not very expert way, in the way of moving here and there and using flash. And sometimes some of the pictures, the photograph machine is doing some quite big noise. So the point is, do not create a parallel event to the Harikatha. That can happen, and that can be a distraction. And already we have we may have some difficulty to be attentive. So what to speak if we add on top of that layers of distraction in the way of my cell phone, the picture photograph machine, and this and that. So we should try to mm, focus as much as we can and do the necessary arrangements in that connection. Also, something that we spoke recently, some words were exchanged there on social media, is regarding children during Harikata, how to adjust that. That's an important point because it's an unavoidable situation that requires criterion, that requires common sense, of course, affection and consideration for everyone, not only for the one giving Harikata, for the children themselves, for the audience, for the one giving Harikata. So if the main disturbance in a lecture comes from children, may come, they may be shouting and playing and running here and there. I would say actually that the children are not actually disturbing. They are not the ones disturbing. They just want to express, as I mentioned some time ago, their childhood. I mean, they are children. I mean, you cannot expect them to be adults. But adults should be adults, not children. So here everyone should play their role. So the children want to express this childhood, and they need to have a proper place for that. It's common sense. I've seen sometimes devotee parents trying to force their children into to listen to the class, to be adults, if you will, in a rush into adulthood, so they can purify themselves and they can acquire bhakti samskar from the very first years of their life for whatever reason. But actually, a child is not yet ready to maybe sit for and quiet for an hour or more. Even for adults, that's not easy. What to speak sometimes of children and really listen to the lecture. So we don't have to be superficial in that sense. We have to apply common sense. A child will want to play, will want to run, especially if there are some other children, especially nowadays times that if you make some meeting with human beings personally and some child get together, they will want to run, to play, to shout, to be children. But again, they need a suitable place for doing so. So in that connection, I generally agree. Of course, sometimes there may be exceptions to the rule, but the general idea will be that the ideal standard will be to have a separate area for the children to play. Of course, if they can remain quiet enough in the Pracara area, drawing or something, of course, there's no problem. But if they need to really further express their childhood, they will need some separate area to play. And one of the parents, ideally, should be there taking care of them, or some elderly, whatever, someone who may just in case take care for whatever may happen. And they may take turns with other parents. Of course, not the same part every single prachar during the different lectures. And nowadays, with online streaming, most of the meetings, they can follow the meeting online. There's not that in every sense of the term, they are losing the harikata, the chance of that. They can connect on their phone and they can hear the kata, but also they should be attentive to the children for sure. So I personally think that it's part of the commitment and responsibility of being a parent, a father, a mother, to be there also in those moments as well. I understand that the parents may want to take a break from that, from the parenthood, and just absorb harikata, but they are still parents. So this can be done taking turns, since those parents will like to be in the lecture and take a break again from their parenthood dynamic. So everything can be done by having proper regard, concern, communication. So after speaking about children, now let's go to children, adults, if you will. Adults who should be adults, but sometimes they may engage in certain childhood-like actions in the context of Harikata as well. And this is a whole important chapter. We already have been sharing some ideas, but now I want to focus on this today, which is an important chapter of Vaishnava etiquette that should be an updated section nowadays. Hari Bhakti Vilas was written hundreds of years ago, and it doesn't have a section, a chapter of Vaishnava etiquette on social media. So we should write that chapter. We should update that section nowadays. In the context of Harikata, especially, that nowadays the main platform for Harikata will be Zoom, for example, or something like this. Actually, we are thinking to present some series. I was speaking with one good brother of mine about presenting a whole series of lectures about how to deal with social media in the context of being sadhakas. So that may be one of the series in some months in our Tattva Vivek series. coming soon to a theater near you. So, to begin with, regarding Vaishnava etiquette in social media, not only necessarily in the context limited to the context of Pracara, but I think that if I choose to present myself as a Gaudiya Vaishnava in social media, with my Facebook account, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, with spiritual name and so on, I'm kind of representing my tradition to the world, to the public. So in that case, I should then share posts that represent my ideals and not otherwise, basically. I think hopefully that sounds commonsensical, because sometimes I've seen devotees getting too absorbed in discussing mundane topics uh, publicly on their social media accounts, not only with their non-devotee friends, if you will, but also in so-called sadhu sangha, or posting links about, I don't know, mundane movies or mundane music. And again, there may be some content that may be nourishing to our practice. That's one thing, but sometimes we really have to say that sometimes it's not the case. Or sometimes the vote is publicly publishing extreme political statements or even sensual pictures while simultaneously presenting themselves again as a representative of a tradition that has nothing to do with all those things in one point. So at least make yourself an account with your secular name for all those stuff, if you will. Of course, ideally, try to regulate that gradually. I know that this is a learning curve and it may take time, but I think it's important that if we are presenting ourselves as practitioners of a certain path, to understand that we have to walk the talk, as we always say. And social media is designed for distraction and stupidity, basically. So it lends itself in that direction. So we should be very careful. We are dealing with very subtle and powerful influences. They're a big, powerful embassy of Maya Shakti that, of course, we can connect in the context of Swarup Shakti. But I mean, again, we should be aware of our capacity of doing so. And in the context of these, of posting sometimes some nonsensical stuff, I will say it's needless to say, but I should say, please do not gossip in social media. Gossip is one of the worst things we can do for our devotional project. That's the main thing, very first thing that Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Das Goswami when he has some advice. He said, Gramya katana stanibe gramya vartanagahibe. Do not speak gossip, do not hear gossip. You may not be speaking, you may not be participating actively, but you may be a passive character there. On social media lends itself a lot. You may be not writing anything, but you are reading, he said this to this, and he posted this and this. And gossip, again, one thing is healthy postings, some other thing is gossip. For example, the Cambridge Dictionary definition of gossip is conversation of or reports about other people's private lives that may be unkind, disapproving, or not true. And we live in the era of sometimes called post-truth, when basically there's no truth whatsoever. I mean, you just take whatever is posted here and there, and you do not take the time for the proper research in order to prove, is this true or not? So we tend to take things very quickly, rushing emotionally, and someone is victimizing himself, herself, and everyone is supporting, oh, poor of you, and maybe the person is just lying or going into his, her own mind stuff and putting whatever thing is there. So it's very delicate. It's very delicate. And gossip, why do we gossip? Of course, sometimes we may gossip because we are jealous from another person, but I will say that mainly we gossip because we feel bad about ourselves or we feel inferior to another. So when you gossip, means you speak badly about some other, which is technically Vaishnava Parad. So by putting another person down in our condition and state, we feel better. We feel better about ourselves. I'm happy when the other is suffering. I'm suffering when the other is happy, but Thakur said, representing the conditioned mind. So gossip gives in this way a sense of superiority over another. Superficial way, of course. Gossiping is maybe the quickest and easiest way to do that. Very quickly, you can create that impression. Of course, it's much more difficult to try to improve yourself. So it's easier, I put someone down but through gossip, and I feel myself superior instead of changing, transforming my own heart. Making a change within our own heart may take a lot of time, take a lot of hard work, which is the idea. And the result may be delayed, may not be guaranteed. So we feel, oh, there's no specific time span after which we can expect to have improved. So gossiping is much easier. And the result is immediate. So let's take that option. And in the context of spiritual life, we could say that gossiping is a form of breaking the regulative principles, I will say. It's a form of intoxication. It's a parallel to drinking alcohol or taking some drugs in the material world. Why do you take drugs in the material world? To make yourself feel better, basically, to do not feel so bad about yourself. So there is really no difference. The basic principle is the same. Again, in this world, in the material existence, when a person feels him, herself depressed, rejected, insecure, lonely, whatever, isolated, ugly, misunderstood, insignificant, stupid, excluded, that person will try to stop, to numb out those feelings as quickly as possible, in an instinctive way. So drugs will be there for that. Alcohol will do the trick, if you will. But for those who do not use drugs or alcohol, as we do not in our tradition, but we may be feeling those things still. So we will have some other way, some other quick fix. Even without speaking about Gaudiya Vaishnava, let's say someone who is not a Gaudiya Vaishnava and who is not taking drugs, what that person will do, there will be some other option like sex, food, extreme doses of chocolate and caffeine, or overworking, gambling, all this stuff that, or codependence, becoming addicted to another person, ways of coping with that emptiness. But devotees are not doing any of those things, basically. They are not taking drugs, nor alcohol, nor gambling, and they are living regulated lives. At least that's the ideal. So the point is, what will a sadhaka, again, not maybe a very advanced devotee, but a sadhaka on some level will do to try to stop, to numb those painful feelings that follow like a shadow, if you will. So the answer will be gossip. Gossip is a form of addiction that really is quite popular in spiritual societies. You can see that it's really unbecoming. And it's unbecoming also that we do not take a vow not to gossip in our tradition. That will be included when we say, I don't know, to be truthful. That implies basically not to gossip. To not take intoxication, that implies not to gossip. When we say to not to be vegetarian or vegan, it means to be compassionate. That means not to gossip. To control my sexual impulse, it has to do with purity. That means not to gossip. Not to take intoxicants means austerity. That means not to gossip. All those four regulative principles point to this idea of not to gossip, even though externally, officially, we are not saying that. We are asking sometimes disciples, do not promise this. So gossip is like a feel-good drug, basically, and easily available. You just, it's one click and you are thrown in that world, in that constellation. All you have to do is to find another person willing to partake, and you are ready to go. Some ear in social media, you have thousands of ears that are just waiting for someone to post something in that connection and quote unquote nourish themselves, malnourish themselves. So social media is just designed for that, for gossip. So this is really connected to our concept of prachar, because prachar includes achar, and gossip is exactly the opposite of that. So let's try to take care of that. Of course, if we do that properly, at one point we'll be thrown in our ultimate realm of Braj, where there will be another type of Gramya Kata, village talk, where all the Brajavasis will be speaking about Krishna, or maybe even criticizing Krishna. There will be another type of gossip in Braj, in the Leela, but that's another thing, the Prakriti realm. But the main point here, so I was just mentioning about gossip with your permission, but main point here is Vaishnava etiquette in the context of Prachar, which of course gossip, not to gossip is a big part of that. So let's continue with some practical tips regarding how to behave ourselves in the context of Pracara and in the context of social media Pracara. One of the main examples is the one we are experiencing now, Zoom. So some Vaishnava etiquette on Zoom meetings. As host of the meeting, as the host of the meeting, or as the participants of the meetings. Because nowadays, again, Zoom, Facebook streaming, all this may be the main preaching areas. So again, some of them may seem commonsensical, but let me mention them. If you are taking part in a Zoom meeting, please try to turn on your camera only if you will be really there hearing the lecture at every moment, and not if you will be starting doing some other things, because that creates distraction during the lecture, the kata. Sometimes I've seen devotees, they turn on the cameras and they start to eat lunch or breakfast, and they are cleaning their house, and they are moving here and there, and they are driving a car, but they are moving the cell phone in one way or another, and it seems like you are in a roller coaster if you are seeing that camera. So the idea is, if you are doing something apart from just being there hearing the lecture, you can turn off the camera because it may create some unnecessary distraction. Of course, again, be attentive to turn off your microphone during lecture, because sometimes I've seen that that doesn't happen, and that may be an extra disturbance. Try to not be so excessive with too many greetings via chat. Sometimes there may be like an unending list of Haribol, Dandavat, hello, great, thank you. And sometimes in the midst of that, there were some questions on important point that if you need to find them, you have to go through 108 hello, thank you so much. And it may be a little difficult. Or sometimes what I've seen that it sometimes creates some distraction when you are doing a Zoom lecture and you're streaming via Facebook. In the Facebook chat, sometimes the devotees like to put emojis, like illustrate the points being said in the lecture. So if I am speaking now about, so Mahaprabhu gave us a shower of mercy, someone will put an emoji of some rain falling and that. And after 5 minutes, we have to offer the flower of our hearts to the Lord, and someone will post an emoji of flowers. And at the end of the lecture, you have like, again, 108 emojis. And you realize maybe the person was a little bit more concentrated in that direction, that really absorbing the sacredness of the moment. What else? Something else that I think, again, all the things are trying to create a sacred atmosphere so we can really appreciate what's Harikatha. Also, ideally, if we are, for example, waiting for a lecture, as we do on Sundays when my Guru Maharaj is giving his lectures and some devotees are connecting some minutes ago, we should try to create a sacred atmosphere. Try to not speak about two relative issues that may really create another atmosphere before Sri Guru comes, basically. Because again, at least for me, to connect to my Guru's lecture 5 minutes back, it's like entering into the temple room, sitting there and waiting for him to appear. For me, there's no difference, even though I'm connected in Zoom. It's not that I can do whatever I like because I'm not actually there. No, I'm there. I want to invoke that idea. I'm in the temple. I have, when I don't click and enter into Zoom, it means I've entered the temple room. So my Guru didn't come. I will wait for him in the proper mood. It's not that we will be speaking nonsense and, oh, Gurudev is coming, let's stop speaking that. Well, ideally, we should align ourselves with the sacredness of the moment. So to prepare ourselves for what's coming, for the Karikata. Also, I think that it will be nice, it's a good point, that to try to avoid two parallel dialogues in chat, for example, via Zoom. Of course, sometimes Sri Guru may, or some sadhu may be giving a Harikatha and wanting to, speaking about one verse, and someone may quote the verse. It's okay, not to give the full reference or give some linking connection to the topic or make some follow-up concept. But the danger with that, it's nice, but there is a danger to that, is that that may like create a whole parallel conversation which may last for minutes. Meanwhile, the other conversation is still going on. So that can be also quite distracting, because for you to engage in a parallel conversation, you are not hearing the other one for sure. So that happens sometimes. That happened yesterday, one of my Guru Maharaj's lecture. It was interesting because he was speaking and something started, the conversation started, and again, there is a good intention and trying to develop a point, and there should be place for that, but maybe that's not the moment. And interestingly, when that happened, I tried to share some brief message that be careful about not overextending into parallel chat that may distract us from the main discourse. And immediately after that, my Guru Maharaj said, without knowing what's going on in the chat, he narrated one lila where Srila Prabhupada was hearing Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta in a lecture, and someone was trying to speak with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't want to hear. He wanted to hear the lecture, but kind he moved like to the person, and Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta chastised Prabhupada publicly, like implying, I'm here doing my effort to be given Harikatha, and you're sitting there hearing someone else. So I felt that, okay, that was and that confirmation to this important point, that we should really be there with our full self. Nityam Bhagavata Sivaya, hearing attentively. The whole point of these ideas is try to act as if your guru is present there, as if the sadhu is there, because they are there. Try to put yourself in that situation, like we do with the deity, as we mentioned. Act as if the deity is there, as if Krishna is there in the deity, because it's there, even though we may not be fully aware. Try to act as if the Zoom platform is the temple itself, because they are. It is. It's all about what we create of that in our own consciousness. So something regarding the Zoom participants, and as a Zoom host, I will say, which because some of them also sometimes are hosting meetings, apart from some of the things we already have said, I would say that it's important from someone who has the service of being a Zoom host in a Zoom lecture, of course, to begin with, as I mentioned, is to create the proper atmosphere, because it will depend a lot on the host. According to a host, the mood of the host, the rest will behave accordingly. And with this, I don't mean to be extremely serious and you want to smile at all. That's not the idea. But one should perform the service with certain degree, I will say, of formality. Again, with this, I'm not saying that the person should become someone else, less of what he or she is, or suddenly go to extreme of being too grave, too serious, or hard-hearted, or even rude, what to speak. But yes, I consider it's important to preface such type of meetings with little sobriety, if you will. It will be good for one and for the audience. And also, I think that the host, generally, typically a host in any meeting is an impartial figure, if you will. And that's helpful properly. Of course, we may speak about spiritual partiality and so on, but on one level, there should be some impartiality. What do I mean by this in the practical terms? For example, there's a Zoom host and devotees are connected to the meeting. And if the Zoom host, some friend of the host is connected, and you express your friendship to that person and start to greet that person very affectionately, and then some other else connects that you don't know, and you basically do not greet that person, I don't think that's very, very proper for the role of the host. So a host should be impartial in that way. Other way of saying impartial will say be partial to everyone or be equally affectionate to everyone, because sometimes some people may feel bad because of that. Someone is especially being greeted, but some others are not even mentioned. So there's a role, there's an art, of course. So that happens, no? And as I mentioned, sometimes, and I won't give names, that's not the idea of pointing to anyone or saying someone is wrong or ill-intended or something like that. But sometimes it seems, sometimes before my Guru Maharaj is giving some lectures, some devotees, or sometimes the host may speaking about topics that I personally, as I mentioned, do not consider them proper for prefacing the Harikatha of one's Guru. And again, I don't mind if people have fun for a moment, especially nowadays that in COVID time, nobody almost is able to meet anyone. So suddenly you have a meeting and you want to, to speak with people and to greet people and to express your affection. So it's great. But also there should be a place for all these moments so they can really play themselves out properly. So I don't mind that people have fun, have a nice time, or speak about more personal things or relative things. But I don't think that the previous minutes before one's guru's lecture, for example, is the exact moment for doing so. And it's a fine line, for sure. But the art of hosting implies to always have in mind and the whole of the audience, not only what I feel, what I want, who connected is my friend, but not getting too absorbed in personal interactions while losing sight of the rest of the ones that are present there. So as I mentioned, for me, And I want to, sorry if I repeat myself a little bit, but something that helps me a lot is like if I'm waiting for my Guru Maharaj uh, to come in temple room, I will be waiting for him in a certain mood, in a temple mood, if you will. Of course, with this I do not mean something too reverential either. So for me, entering into these Zoom meetings is basically not different from entering into the temple, sitting at the feet of my Gurudev. So I think it's good for all of us, the ones who have served as hosts, because it's a seva to Sri Guru, basically, for those who are there as hearers, as participants, but in this case, the host that may help the rest of the audience to create that teachable moment. Because again, like it or not, the general mood of these meetings will depend a lot on how the host behaves, and the rest will mostly follow, or will remain silent while not feeling too comfortable to participate. So in summary, I think it's healthy for the audience, especially if that includes newcomers, what to speak, who may quickly idealize something according to what they perceive in the immediacy. No? So I think it's healthy for the whole audience to find a preliminary section that may be as similar as to what they will receive some minutes later when the sadhu comes and starts sharing Harikatha, Harikatamrita. And again, I know nowadays it may be difficult to only do that, to just hear the lecture, to just be in the sacred vibe mood. And most of us need to be doing something else simultaneously. We have multitasking DNA. We are part of that era. Our mind has been trained without even noticing that to that in that direction, multi engagement. But again, we need to also honor our attention. We need to respect our attention as well as the others, as we are mentioning, since our attention will be the only thing that we will be offering to Hari Guru Vaishnavas. Our focus, our absorption, that will be our ultimate offering to Hari Guru and Vaishnav. So some words I want to share in connection to Pracara, again, not only in the context of giving a lecture, typical lecture, but considering nowadays dynamics in social media and whatnot. So today I will finish here with the topic on Prachar. Next lecture we will continue with a similar term, Prasad, which is a great one. But let's give some minutes for for questions, whatever you may like to share. So I will activate the option for you to unmute yourself just in case. There it is.
I have a question, Maharaj.
Yes.
Yes.
Try to
Try to
your volume, because if not,
because
here
okay.
possible.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to know, what if someone's writing a book like this was in your reference to Mangalacharana? Like, what if devotees are writing stories about other devotees or lessons or instructions on something relevant maybe to their material life that would help them be more Krishna conscious? Would they write a Mangalacharana as well?
Well, as I mentioned, when we speak about Mangaletoram in the context of a book, I mentioned that this was something done in classical Gaudiya Shastra, no? In a certain time and culture, where there was a certain way of presenting the message and topic when writing a book. And that was really like one of the elements there, as we will see in the Sandarbhas and in everywhere. In the Bhagavatam, we have the different elements of the Mangalacharana. I didn't go into detail there today. Vastu Nirdesh, Namaskar, Shloka, Ashirvad. But I will say that not necessarily every single book written by a devotee has to include the Mangalacharana in such a specific way, but in some form or another, it should include that somehow or other. It should. Sometimes nowadays it may take the form of a dedication. You also see that in the books. There's a dedication, and dedication generally implies, in the context of Gaudiya Vedanta, some indebtedness to one's guru, basically. or sometimes it may be written in some part of the introduction of the book, some acknowledgement section of the book. Also, there's another part of the book. So nowadays, contemporary books may have taken that form. You have the introduction, the acknowledgement section, the dedication. Sometimes in the old times there were no such sections. There were not acknowledgements, or so all of them were included in the book in what we know today as Mangaletoram. We will see, I don't know, Jiva Goswami expressing his indebtedness to Gopal Bhatta Goswami at the beginning of the Sandarbhas for sharing the main notes on which he wrote the Sandarbhas and so on. So again, you don't necessarily have to include that. I don't know if you're writing a book for general public, you may, if you write a very classical Mangaletoram, that may seem a little bit awkward for the audience you are pointing. But I will say that nonetheless, there should be some form of Mangaletoram, even if it's not written in the book. That should be written in your heart, if you will. You should be really invoking the blessings of your guru and offering pranam to them while writing the book. You should be doing that service from that vantage point, even though if the reader is not aware of that, you follow, because an introductory reader may not even know about Mangaletoram and transpersonal authorship and so on. But you know that, so you will engage in that some way or another. It may be in the book explicitly, overtly, or it may be implicitly in an underlying way. And those who know will feel that and will find that there. So again, there is certain flexibility to that. It's not like a fixed rule that this should be take this particular form or that and so on. I sometimes give even lectures going to the Mangaletoram in the context of giving Harikatha. And in certain situations, I don't know, let's say I'm invited to speak to a radio program. And it may sound awkward if I say, okay, before start to speak, I will recite my Mangaletoram, and I will be like 3 minutes invoking all my mantras in radio program, in TV program, or whatever. So I may not do that externally, but internally, I will be doing that. Because again, I need that connection. I need that focus. So we have to find a way to somehow or other do that. That's the idea. It may take different forms, visible, invisible, but Mangaletoram should be there somehow or other. Okay, so any other question?
I want.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I think at the same time activated that microphone. So now the three of them turn off their microphone. So Guru Nista was there, I think. You can.
Dhanyavad Maharaj.
Right, Pranam.
Right. I was very much appreciating your part about the punctuality. Like as a Finn, of course, like Finns are very kind of extreme about that, and I really very much like that myself. Although I can be pretty sloppy myself, but anyway, it's just. But then the other side is, of course, last Sunday, Guru Maharaj was like 10 minutes late, and then when he came, he was still eating, and I thought that was just so hilarious. Like, you know, there's the Pracara, you're supposed to follow certain rules, but then at some point, it just, you kind of let it go. And he's like late so many times. And for years, you know, we've gone to like yoga studios and different programs. And Vrindaran and I are always like, okay, Guru Maharaj, let's go. And he's like, hold on a second. And it's like really aggravating as a servant, but like, what can you do, you know? And anyway, I just wanted to share that kind of funny thing, how Guru Maharaj is definitely not punctual most of the time. But anyway, that's my little offering there.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, Guru Nista. I'm sure that you have gone through that much more than me, but I have had some glimpse of that in my own travelings with Guru Maharaj or some meetings here and there in Southern America. So
yeah, I'm sure.
And yes, when I was saying that, I was saying, okay, so here we are speaking about the Acharya, and he should be given the example. But I know that he's not doing that purposely. And when we speak about superlative Vaishnavas, I will take really another stance, because the lack of punctuality is because of a transcendental reason, I will say, because of certain particular absorption and this and that. It's not something that they are really not concerning, not regarding one's time and energy, because they are really dedicating their lives as gurus to the service of their disciples. So I will say that we as servants should really like just do not become overtly affected by that ourselves. Of course, sometimes we may be affected because we want him to be punctual in his service. No, we want, I don't know, he has a meeting, as you mentioned, some appointment, we want him to be punctual, so everything goes on nicely in the service of him. It's not something that has to do with us per se. But sometimes we may be affected ourselves independently of his service. That's not the idea, but that may happen, so we should work on that as servants. But yes, I appreciate the point. And of course, that doesn't mean that we should try not to make him be as punctual as we can. He may be trying to be as punctual as he can, but we can make something else on that, put some extra. I remember calling you sometimes to some meetings that Guru Maharaj himself even forgot altogether that the meeting was there. So that was not even punctuality, but was just like, where's Guru Maharaj? And he forgot basically, no? And I didn't feel that, oh, that's his mistake, he's not as transcendental as I thought he should. Why he's not considering me? I organized this meet. I mean, he's absorbed in seva, in his own inner bhajan, and he forgot because of that reason. But the point is, we are not to imitate him. We are not, our forgetfulness may be due to some other type of reason. So yeah, my words were not directed to the superlative Vaishnava who may externally show some kind of defect because of some really good virtue on top of that. But thank you very much, Guru Nishta, for the contribution.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more quick thing that oh shoot, now I forgot my point. What was it? Hold on. Okay, I'll tell it later.
We have some points there. You come back whenever you have the point. Yeah.
Thank you.
So there is one message that was sent first by Bhubaneshwari Dasi. She's asking one point regarding social media and personal profiles, that sometimes in certain occasions some devotees will use pictures of Radha, Krishna, Bhagavan, different forms of the divine as profile pictures and not so much a personal picture. So maybe it's a detail, but I would like to know if this is correct or it's better to avoid that, because I myself maybe have done that or some others in the past, and just in case it's not correct, to be more aware of that in the future. I wouldn't say that this is incorrect or something like that. Again, it has to do with what's the mood behind that, what's the consciousness behind that. It's not that, I mean, if I put a picture of Krishna in my profile picture, it's not that I think myself Krishna. So why did I put that? Okay, there may be some good reasons for that. So again, I don't think that it's of course everything in social media may be misinterpreted, and that's why, for example, if you go to India, in many temples they won't allow you to take pictures of the deities, for example. And one may say, well, there may be a relative superficial reason for that, and the reason is that they have the picture shop outside the temple. They will want to sell you the picture. But in a deeper way, and I've met sadhus who think like that, they think, I don't want people to take picture because I don't know how, I don't know the ones taking the picture, and I don't know how they will deal with the picture eventually. The picture is not different from the deity, so if they do not deal with the picture properly, they may engage in aparat. So I don't want them to engage in aparat. And that's why I do not forbid, I forbid that, and I prefer they take darshan and they take the picture in their hearts, basically, and they carry the picture in their hearts. So again, there are different considerations behind that has to do with this idea. How do you deal with sacred images? But in general, I wouldn't say that it's incorrect to have a picture of Bhagavan in your social media. I mean, if you properly are honoring that and dealing with that, personally, I wouldn't have a problem. So I think, I don't know if Guru Nista remember his point. Also, I think that Maros had one question, so whoever would like to connect.
Hare Krishna, Dandavats.
Yes, Maros, tell me.
My question is a little bit off topic maybe, but I got recommendation this book, Krishna Bhajanamrita by Narahari
Okay.
Sarkar.
Mhm.
But I don't understand it at all. It's very complicated. But there is one point that if someone is able to recognize spiritual strength of Vaishnava but don't act accordingly, it is considered as offense. So if you could elaborate on this, maybe.
I didn't hear the last part. If you recognize spiritual strength in a Vaishnava and you don't act accordingly, it's an offense?
Yeah, like if you don't give proper respect to some more advanced devotee or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, basically, that's one of the 6 forms of Vaishnava aparat, which has to do with not showing proper regard for the Vaishnava. There are 6 main offenses to the Vaishnava. We have already spoken about that in some of the lectures concerning Vaishnava Seva. Like killing a Vaishnava, speaking ill of a Vaishnava, thinking wrongly as a Vaishnava, not receive properly a Vaishnava, not properly consider the Vaishnava, do not be happy when you see a Vaishnava even. Of course, there are levels of Vaishnavas and there will be different levels of reciprocation and acknowledging their status, if you will, if you have the capacity of recognizing that, because even in the beginning, one may not be aware of the different, that there are different adhikaris, Vaishnavas possessing different adhikar. But the main idea will be like, yeah, if you have a Vaishnava with certain level of insight, ideally you should be willing to properly honor that. Basically, that's the idea. I mean, to reciprocate accordingly, to serve the Vaishnava according to her adhikar. That's what Rupa Goswami also mentions. That was the Bhagavatam mentioned. You should deal in a certain way with beginners Vaishnava, with intermediate Vaishnava, with higher superlative Vaishnava. There's different ways of dealing with non-Vaishnavas, innocent people, envious people, but all those dealings will be only in terms of serving them. And so if I'm compassionate to a junior person, it's not that I think I'm better than you and you have to learn from me. I'm just serving you, and the service takes the form that is necessary according to the particular relationship. As the same way that you serve your father in one way, your son in another way, your wife in another way. But ideally, all of those things should be done in the context of serving others. But the service will take different forms. So according to Vaishnavas, they are to be served by us. They are the object of our worship and veneration, even more than Krishna. Krishna himself says that. Tadiyanam samarchanam. Tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samarchanam aradhananam sardasham vishnur aradhanam. The topmost form of worship is the worship of Bhagavan, but above that is the worship of those who are dear to him. So in time, we should develop the capacity again of discriminating amongst the Vaishnavas in the healthy way about the different adhikars and what was the best way to serve them, to please them. And if we are not really concerned about that in time, knowing that that's important in our relationship, there comes the risk of engaging in some form of aparat, because you may be relating to a very superlative Vaishnava and you are treating him like he's a junior or whatever. Many forms that may take. Or the opposite, you may say you are treating a junior Vaishnava as a superlative in a way that is not healthy for that junior Vaishnava. You may be disturbing him or her by doing that. Again, in the beginning, you one oneself may be mature and don't know how to do that, and no problem. There's no offense. You should not go neurotic. But in time, when we grow and mature, that criterion will become a necessity in our interactions. Like when you are a baby, you relate with everyone equally. I mean, you are not making too many differences between your father, your mother, the neighbor, or whoever. You behave equally. But when you grow, you start to to make differences. Your mother, my brother, my neighbor, my father, this person I do not know, and you try to reciprocate accordingly. So that should also play itself out in the context of the Vaishnava, always in the context of Seva. So in other words, the offense will be, I'm not willing to serve the Vaishnava, because basically to consider how can I serve the Vaishnava better, that's the point here. If I'm not willing to go through that, it means I'm not willing to serve the Vaishnava. And basically that's an offense, because if I insist on relating to the Vaishnava, but I'm not willing to do the necessary to serve the Vaishnava, so I'm not serving the Vaishnava, what do I want the Vaishnava for in my life? I mean, I'm not serving the Vaishnava, so why I keep relating to the Vaishnava? Maybe I want him to serve me. I want to exploit her. So in that context, we conclude that will be Pracara. So that will be like the gist of this statement by Narahari in his Krishna Bhajanamrita. Right. Gurnista, you have your point?
Jai Maharaj, yes, and now I remembered it. So
Okay.
it was that those moments when Guru Maharaj is like super late and we have some big like public engagement. What I started realizing was that I was like getting aggravated because I was thinking about the people on this like social level instead of thinking about serving Guru Maharaj at the moment. And so that it was a kind of a good like lesson in that way. Like obviously he didn't do it on purpose or anything, but that's what I took out of the situation. That like I was focused kind of on the wrong thing sometimes and too concerned about the social implications instead of just serving him and like whatever he wants to accomplish by having those meetings.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, it's not totally wrong to have that consideration, because again, you are having that consideration in his service. Ideally, that's the idea. So it's not that I'm only absorbed. He wants to be 1 hour late. Okay, I will please my guru fully and I will obey. No, if he's being late and we know that lateness will affect the particular seva that he himself want to render through his writing, let's say, I will insist to him on going. But of course, as you mentioned, it has to be balanced. And it's not that I'm exclusively concerned about the public and what will they think, how they may think. No, you have to balance that with, okay, but here's my guru, he's delayed because of this particular reason. I honor that reason, if you will, I honor that delay. But at the same time, I honor, if you will, the seva that he wants to render to the other people, that I want to render to them and to him. So of course, sometimes in practice, this may not be so easy, and you are trying to inspire him to be a little more quick, to get ready, whatever, without being too much invasive, but also trying to consider that, because we know the other persons won't be able to really understand all the transcendental background for the delay. So you want also to consider that it's part of being compassionate to the non-informed, if you will. So yeah, it has to be balanced. Both things have to be there, but sometimes in the context of serving him, as our Guru Maharaj has said on many occasions, sometimes the guru, at one point, the disciple may even disobey his guru in the context of serving him. That's not easy to understand, but that can happen. The guru may say, I want to do this, and the disciple say, no, you are too old, Guru Maharaj is too quick, it's too late, you cannot do that, you have to take rest, you have to do that. And externally it seems, oh, he's not obeying Sri Guru, but he's doing that from a very intimate relationship of seva, which again is not for everyone. We cannot imitate that. So the point is, the important point is to retain the service attitude according to our personal situation, present connection to the guru, and that may take different forms. That may take the form of you asking Guru Maharaj, please, Guru Maharaj, we are late, come on. But all that will be in your service, not because you are going neurotic about what the world is thinking. But it can be from the wrong reasons as well. So everything is a matter of one's own consciousness behind the action, if you will. But thanks for the contribution, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt about it too. That it really does come down to the motivation, and that's what I was sometimes back in the day. I was like picking that up kind of afterwards in my own behavior. Like, was it really motivated by me wanting to serve Guru Maharaj, or was it that I had other considerations that I had couched as service? You know, so it's like easy to sometimes feel like, okay, you're serving a guru, but you're actually motivated by something else. And and like you said, it can definitely go either way. Either you follow the rules and that's your service to the guru, or you break the rules and that's your service to guru. So it's all about the motivation, I guess.
Yeah.
But thank you.
And I don't think that in this particular example, Guru Maharaj was like, in a conscious way, I will delay myself and I will put Guru Nistha to test. But one as a disciple should say, okay, but Krishna through my Gurudev is creating this situation and I'm being put to test to become more introspective about, as you mentioned, which are my motivations in making him be ready quicker for the meeting or not, whatever the case, whatever the situation, I'm being put to test by this particular dynamics with my guru's instrumental, and a further surrender is being asked from me, a further introspection. So that's, I mean, if the disciple takes that healthiest stance, she passed the test for sure. So
Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it.
thank you so much for sharing the point. So
Thank you.
there's something else.
I have another
Okay.
question. You mentioned about children and making noise, and when Prabhupada was here, it was just known because he would say, please take the children out. But Guru Maharaj never says anything, and a lot of devotees are pretty sensitive now, and they feel hurt when you say anything. So I never want to say anything because they take it as like you don't like their children or you don't like them, and so it's really hard to. I feel bad for Guru Maharaj, and I don't know really how to deal with it.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll take the kids out, but then I don't like to miss the class either.
Mhm. Yeah, but I will say to begin with, and I get your point, and this is not a new thing. I mean, this is not happening only in one particular sangha. That's like all pervading. To begin with, if you have children, you chose to have children. No, I mean, it's not the fault of the other ones. I mean, if you have children, you chose to have children, so you have to take responsibility for that. I remember once I gave one lecture, and I was speaking at the end. The person told me, "Oh, you are saying all the things about spiritual practice and spending your time in that, but you can do that and speak about that and do that because you have time for that. But me," the person was saying, I started to shout almost. I have 8 children and I don't have time for anything. I have to be working all day. I'm doing all day. Like this, and he was like volcano eruption. So the only answer that came to me was like, but you chose to have 8 children. I mean, and I didn't. And you have to be responsible for your choices. That's, I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just you make that choice. Now you take the the proper stance. And you have some responsibility. I don't have children. It doesn't mean I don't have any responsibility. In another sense, I have non-biological children and people who are somehow or other are depending on me, that they are much more of the children of that I could conceive biologically. So if I only became a sannyasi to avoid having children, I did a mistake because I'm having more. So the point is, all of us have to be responsible. So if you have children, that's no problem with that. That's something that can help you to grow so much, and that may be a very beautiful experience, and I'm sure all of you parents know. But also, again, you have to be responsible for that. So, and as you mentioned, Guru Maharaj never says that, and as Sakirati mentioned, I was going to mention that he said that on some cases. Of course, on some baby extreme cases where the children were quite noisy. And again, it's not their fault. I mean, the fault here is in the parents, with all respect, not in the children. The children are children. And I think it's common sense. I mean, if in any public event, if you are going to a public event, a lecture or something, you won't bring your 2-3-year-old children to shout and play and run here and there. That's not the place for them. It's a torture for them. You are not being loving with your children. It's not that if I, the speaker, say, please can someone take care of the children in some place so they may play and enjoy happily in the proper place. I'm not against your children. Actually, the parents are against their children if they are not making the arrangement to do that, because the children need that. I mean, and that's how it plays out through the filter of the ego, actually. The ego will say, you are not loving to my children, where actually the one who is not loving is yourself, if you are not taking proper care of your children. So, I mean, if you are extra sensitive, I'm not you, Mahara, for sure, but whoever in the example you are giving, that if someone says, please, can you take the children somewhere else? It's not that the children are a disturbance. I mean, ideally, the speaker shouldn't even have to tell that. The arrangements should be done in such a way that the speaker is not put into the situation of having to organize the parenthood of all the children present there. The person is giving Harikatha. That's the main point there. So the parents should be sensitive enough to do that before, to do that arrangement or organization before, as part of their parenthood, as part of increasing their responsibility as fathers. And they may take turns. We're hearing the Harikatha. And again, you can hear the Harikatha online. I mean, there's not that's, and if you don't want any of those things, you can remain as a brahmachari, no problem. You can accept sannyas, no problem. So, but somehow or other, we should really be considerate, because if not, it's too egocentric. I'm only concerned, I want to be in the class. I don't care for my children, let them be free, whatever. And if someone says something to them, I take offense, you do not love my children. And all of that is going on in the platform of false ego, with all respect, on the platform of exploitation, basically. I want to enjoy. I don't want to take responsibility, and I don't want to make the necessary sacrifice for everything to go on smoothly for everyone, not only thinking about me. That's the point. The problem is when you only think about yourself and do not care about even your children, who may be much better, more comfortable and happy in another place where they're shouting and rolling on the ground and frolicking, and they can do that as much as they like, and nobody's like looking at them and saying, shh. I mean, they should have their place for sure. And I think that's, you're not rejecting them. Actually, you are. I mean, on another moment, all of us, even the speaker, may go and play with the children, but not during the Harikatha. Harikatha is a particular moment for a particular presentation of Siddhanta, if you will. And another moment we can frolic with the kids all together. But again, I think that being a parent, part of being a parent means not to be oversensitive regarding those issues, and not to put the fault and the blame on the environment, but take responsibility. Of course, the speaker, again, should be sensitive enough, also should be loving enough to say that, but we shouldn't say, oh, no, Guru Maharaj is never saying that in class, so we can remain with the children shouting. It's not a problem for him. Even if that's the case, we should also think about the rest of the audience. So again, we shouldn't force the speaker or someone else to come and tell us, please, can you do that? Those things should be also already common sense for all of us. And if modern parents, or however you may like to call them, some of them, I'm not saying all, may not have this awareness, okay, so elder parents should take the responsibility to educate them, ideally. And I know it's not an easy thing, and I know there may be situations where there still will be some problems. We are not in Golok Vrindavan, so always some things will happen, and that's part of the experiences in this prakat lila, if you will. So, I mean, it's not that I'm giving magical reply and everything will work from now on. Maybe now I have more enemies than ever by saying this, but I hope not, because I'm trying really to be honest and sincere, and hopefully present some common sense to how to deal with those situations. So yeah, it takes sacrifice, but in sacrifices, our Guru Maharaj says, is the womb through which love will be born. So I hope that helps Mahara and everyone who may have to deal with that situation. I'm one of the main ones, so thank you for your consideration. So I think we can finish here today. We have already spoken quite a bit, so see you next Thursday. We will continue, as I mentioned, with our lecture on Prasad, entering into the final section of our two last meetings of our Vaishnava Etiquette series in March. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Vo. Vancha kalpataru vyashta kripa sindhu vyaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.